Today, there are more than 300 million guns in America, silently triggering our aggressive impulses. A few of us give in to them. But if you catch the gun virus, do you have it for life? Gun violence, whether it's mass shootings or the ceaseless daily litany of killings, is almost always committed by one type of person: young men. If we're going to eradicate the gun virus, we need therapies to target those who've been infected. Is there any way to cure them? Neuroscientist Kent Keel is trying to understand the brains of those who kill.
John 911, what's the location of your emergency? Sandy Hook Elementary School. I keep hearing shooting. It's still happening.
I was approached by the parents who had lost their children at Sandy Hook Elementary School in that tragedy. And they asked if there was any science that we could do that might help us understand why people might commit such types of crimes and how we might be able to develop better ways of preventing them.
The tragedy of Sandy Hook haunts our society. In just 5 short minutes, 20 first graders were murdered, along with 6 teachers. The killer was male, 20, and disturbed. Not unlike the young juveniles Kent has come to study.
All of these kids that we were working with were in an ultra supermax facility, the highest risk facility in the state of New Mexico, because they had committed 1 or more felonies. And I'm not talking, simple things. These are serious multiple felons. A lot of the time, the crimes that are committed by these kids use handguns or firearms. And almost every one of them has had or owns a firearm or has acquired one. It's really something that's just commonplace.
Kent studies the brains of these violent young offenders, but his subjects can't come to an MRI lab. So he brings the lab to them.
So we designed and created a state-of-the-art mobile MRI system. We've scanned the brains of over 4,000 inmates, developed the world's largest repository of youth populations.
Kent is trying to detect patterns in brain anatomy that are correlated with violent behavior. He scanned the brains of 25 incarcerated young men who had committed murder and contrasted them with the brains of 150 offenders who had not. He looked for differences in areas involved with emotion, impulse control, and decision-making: the amygdala, anterior cingulate, and orbitofrontal cortex. The scans revealed stark differences.
Turns out that parts of this amygdala are actually not well developed in youth that commit homicides compared to their peers. As well, kids that commit homicide have less orbitofrontal cortex. Parts of the brain that we have found that are not developed normally or developed differently are actually parts of the brain that are kind of the last to develop. They usually don't reach full maturity until age about 25. It appears almost like even though they're 15, 16 years old, their brains might only really be 10, 11 years old.
With 85% accuracy, Kent could guess which juveniles had committed murder just by looking at their brain scans. Do these differences mean some people are incurably violent? Or is there a saving grace in the brain's capacity to change?
People are only really kind of beginning to understand this, but the brain continues to change throughout your life. All the experiences that you have, they continue to shape and mold the brain.
But most prison experiences are not helpful for inmates' brains.
Unfortunately, in a correctional environment, there's really no behaviors that get reinforced positively. If you're quiet and you're good and you don't do anything, what happens? Nothing. The only thing that gets these individuals any type of social interaction is aggression. It's a very dangerous environment for everyone. That's called compression. It compresses them into a very limited set of behavioral things that they do.
The term compression comes from diving. As a diver descends into the depths, he encounters greater and greater pressure from the water. After a while, his body adjusts. But at this point, returning to the surface actually becomes dangerous. Kent thinks it is just as hard for imprisoned kids to return to positive kinds of interaction.
The diving analogy is a good one because, you don't just pop right back up to the surface and you're healthy again. That can kill you, right?
Kent is now studying kids who've been through a therapeutic program called decompression. It asks social workers and prison guards to reward good behaviors instead of just punishing bad ones.
And so if the kids were good today and they talked to someone and they engaged with someone and they didn't get in fights, they'll get some rewards. And they learn through this positive reinforcement strategies that good things can happen to them if they act better.
12 months after decompression therapy, Kent conducted a second series of scans. He saw that critical regions had begun to grow and change.
There's an area of the brain that helps to regulate decision-making and capacity for decision and help you understand when you make mistakes. And that area of the brain is called the anterior cingulate. And we actually are seeing an increase in activity there. These circuits, the controller, help to regulate your behavior, regulate your thinking. They are getting better.
Many underage felons are ultimately released and have to make the dangerous transition back to a free society. A group of inmates not treated with decompression went on to kill 16 more people. But inmates who received the therapy killed no one.
One of the things that the programs try to teach them is how not to act impulsively. Whether that's with a firearm or without, it's likely to lead to better outcomes if they don't act impulsively.
Kent may have found a way to cure those who've been infected by the gun virus.